West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Joining me now are Laura Jarrett, NBC's senior legal correspondent, and Kyle Cheney, senior legal affairs reporter for Politico. It's great to see you both tonight as we try and understand exactly what is happening in what appears to be a mystery wrapped in enigma, wrapped in something that's under seal.
Well, some of the things are pretty clear.
Yeah, well, okay, first, Laura, I would love your perspective on the unusual timing yesterday, ordering one side to respond by midnight, special counsel has to respond by 6 a.m.
I've never seen that.
How did you interpret that?
That the stakes are very high and that there is something in those materials that the judge, assuming that she reviewed the materials in private, which is called in camera, before she actually ordered them to be turned over. NBC is not yet reporting that, but that's typically how it goes. The judge reviews them and then says, hey, you have to turn them over. Something in those she decided was so high stakes and so important that it needed to be turned over expeditiously. And then the DC Court of Appeals agreed with her.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we haven't been able to see what's in those materials. The entire case is under seal, so we don't know what that is. But whatever it is, obviously, Jack Smith cares a lot about it as well, because he went to the trouble of trying to get these materials so that the grand jury can see them. The grand jury that is reviewing this and preparing, to possibly indict.
Do you draw any conclusions about the time frame on all of this, given the rapidity with which or the alacrity with which they seem to be moving through some of what would seem to be end stages of this investigation?
I think that it is fair to say you do not go after the former president's attorney until you are really at sort of a critical juncture. It's certainly not the move you would make as your first entry into the case. You would probably do it once you've developed enough facts and evidence to feel like this is really something we need. In fact, you'd have to make that showing to the judge that this is really critical evidence. That's not to say that they are anywhere near close to an indictment. They may not be nearly far as along as perhaps the DA in Manhattan, for instance. But I think it is fair to say that you would do this at an advanced stage in the investigation.
Kyle, I want to ask you, what is your estimation about what else we might expect in terms of witnesses that could be called, in terms of the work that remains on this case, which to the layman seems pretty exhaustive at this point?
Right. Well, and I think just to even put it in a broader perspective, you have what's happening in Manhattan, you have the documents case, and then you have Fulton County, where Trump is being investigated for attempting to overturn the election in Georgia. All three of those could be imminent. It's not even just the two we've talked about, but this third one in Fulton County where indictment could come any day. The DA in Fulton said it's imminent. The charging decisions are imminent there. So it's really remarkable when you think about, and I think it's absolutely right, when you are going to pierce attorney-client privilege, especially on a crime fraud theory, you are pretty much at the end game. Judges don't like to do that. and ever in any circumstances. And so when you have the chief judge at the time agreeing that that's appropriate and the appeals court agreeing with her, it seems like the evidence must be pretty compelling and overwhelming. And so now the question is, will Corcoran show on Friday? Will there be some effort to send this to the Supreme Court, which we haven't seen any signals of yet? So, and there's some reporting, I think, that Trump is not interested in going to the Supreme Court. So this may be that he shows up and he gives them the goods that he has, and an indictment could be fairly forthcoming right after that.
What's your assessment of that, Laura? Because, while the judge ruled that, yes, the evidence Corcoran has to testify, the evidence has to go, the prosecutors can look at the evidence that we're talking about, and we'll get to that in a second, but the appeals process continues, right? Kyle's saying that Trump reportedly doesn't want this to go to the Supreme Court, given how they've handled previously sort of similar things. I mean, what's your estimation about the fight ahead and how much this could be litigated further?
Well, keeping the appeal open can be risky for Smith. If in the event that later down the line a court decides actually these documents should not have come into evidence, should not have gone before a jury, and the whole thing gets thrown out, that could be particularly problematic for him. So even if he is allowed and his team are allowed to review these materials, they may not ultimately use them in whatever decision they make about whether or not to go forward, if they were to go forward with an indictment.
Well, and let's just talk about the materials, right? We're talking about notes from personal audio recordings.
We don't know what that is, but yeah.
We don't know what that is, but the judge who's examined this material is referring to it as Trump's alleged criminal scheme. I mean, she's putting the word Trump and criminal scheme together after the review of these materials, which may include notes from personal audio recordings.
Well, and what's so weird is usually when you see the crime fraud exception invoked, it's in a case where the lawyer is in some sort of cahoots with the client. In this case, what at least it appears to be is that the judge, has suggested that Trump actually misled his own attorneys in some way. Again, the contours of that we're going to have to report out. But as you said in your setup here, we know that part of the reason Corcoran is so interesting is he drafts what turns out to be a highly misleading statement that the Justice Department receives and relies on. Was that done at his client's suggestion? And if so, how did all of that come together? Those are the kinds of questions Smith is going to try to be drilling down on.
The statement is this sort of centerpiece of the obstruction case, right? This notion that the Trump legal team says, you know what, guys? You got everything. Yeah. Now, what we know about that statement is Evan Corcoran drafts it, but Christina Bobb, a different lawyer, signs it. And Kyle, I wonder if you're interested in the sort of choreography of the signing of that statement, because it suggests, I think their inference is going to be drawn about who knew what in terms of the legality of that statement.
Right, and that's why, one of the questions I've got is Evan Corcoran coming forward willingly? Is he someone who says, I want to tell you what I know, to clear my own name and maybe to clear the people who worked with me, and then Trump is intervening to block him, because the sequence of events here suggests that it was Trump who intervened to stop Corcoran from coming forward and to stop him from talking. Now, again, I don't know, because this is all happening in secret, because it's all under seal, we learn bits and pieces here and there. And so it's hard to always judge, what are the motivations here. But one of the theories, at least behind why the appeals court moved with such urgency, is because perhaps Corcoran was ready to come say what he knew, and if they didn't step in to sort of adjudicate this, it might have been too late. We saw a very similar situation play out last fall when Mark Short and Greg Jacobs, some aides to Mike Pence, were subpoenaed to testify to the January 6th grand jury. Same, very similar secret process that Trump lost, and the very next day after he lost that process, Mark Short came in and testified. And so, we've seen this movie before in a certain way, and maybe Evan Corcoran has a lot to say.
That's a fascinating theory, Laura, and I wonder what you make of it, that perhaps Evan Corcoran is a cooperative witness, and they got to get this material in the prosecutor's hands stat because he wants to come and testify.
We just don't know. There has also been some reporting out there that Beryl Howe actually ordered him to produce all these documents by, X date. And so the idea was the appellate court, in order to make sure that they got out ahead of that ruling, they ordered everything to be done so expeditiously so that they could have a full, sort of airing of their side of this before he was actually ordered to produce the stuff by Beryl Howe. But we just simply don't know. I wish we did. We're working on it. But I think we just don't yet know enough about what Corcoran's level of cooperation is here, if any.
Well, we do have a sense that he's pretty exposed, and we do have reporting that he is still working as a lawyer for Donald Trump. Which, Laura, again, I am not a lawyer, but that seems pretty perilous, not only for Evan Corcoran, but also for Donald Trump. Because if Evan Corcoran is a potential witness in this case,
he would no longer be able to defend him. I mean,
also Trump could be accused of witness tampering, couldn't he? I mean, there's just so many levels to how this is legally perilous for all parties involved. Does it surprise you that Evan Corcoran is still involved in legal counsel to Donald Trump on this?
Nothing would surprise me about any of this anymore, given how all the legal machinations in this case go. But I think we have to wait and see how some of this plays out. And again, I think the big question is, how does Smith want to use this material?
Yeah.
Right? Because remember, the bar for getting at, just through a grand jury subpoena is lower than obviously the threshold he would have to make in court to actually prove these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a different threshold. And so I'm curious to see how, if at all, Smith uses the materials that he fought so hard to get.
Yeah, and I will say, we just want to highlight, in addition to the statement that we talked about, it's also this phone call that Trump makes to Corcoran, allegedly, in and around the same time frame that the DOJ is subpoenaing to get their hands on the video footage that then reveals that, yes, indeed, people were moving boxes around Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
The contents of that call are going to be of great interest, well, to all of us, let's be honest, but especially to the Department of Justice as it tries to figure out what, as you point out, it's going to do in this Mar-a-Lago documents case.
It is Thursday, the 23rd of March of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life, just a little. Get too much and it might, burn you out, maybe. Well. Just to give you a running update on personal life. We spoke, when I say we, it's not the royal we, my sister and I spoke with the discharge nurse. I haven't actually spoken with a doctor, PA, but we did express that a care home would not be a good thing to send our mother. And so we're going to bring her home, and that will take the doctor determining that her levels are such that she can come home. We were informed that her stats are not at the emergency type level where they would normally keep her. But they just want to make sure that everything's in place. So we're going to get home care, a real nurse coming in once a week or so, just sort of put eyes on the ground and check mom out, that sort of thing. We'll have, of course, the occupational and physical therapist coming in, which is what we want, because my mom has an aversion to anything called exercise. So we have to use all of these different terms for what might be exercise. I don't know what it is. And because we're kind of like, all of us kids, we're sort of like jocks. I gotta say, I don't know. Maybe that was our form of rebellion. Her heart will never get back to where it was, but it can get stronger, and that is by exercising. No salt, low salt diet, and those sorts of things. And, she'll have to be on furosemide and whatnot. But, essentially want to make her comfortable, keeping her moving around, and she wants to come home anyway. So we will be doing that, and we're working towards that. So that's actually good news. And my mom was a bit cantankerous, which is also a good sign, because when she's cantankerous, that means that, I don't know, she's getting her wits about her. I know. Everything is contrarian. Everything. But anyway, that is good news, and she did express that she wants to come home, and I consider that to be a good sign too. She's not giving up. She's a fighter. She is a survivor. All right, so as long as she's not in anguish and pain and all that BS, otherwise, we have to make her more comfortable, and we don't want to keep her around just because of us. Well, not just because of us. Anyway, I just thought I would relay that to you, and hopefully we'll get her out. I don't know if it's going to be today. It could be tomorrow. Keeping our fingers crossed. So hopefully today, tomorrow, maybe Saturday. I don't know. It looks like it could be soon, and that's what was intimated, and I'm going to take it like that. Whatever the doctor says is what I told them. Okay, so what else is going on in the world? Everything all at once, everywhere. That's right. It looks like old Trump's got a lot of trouble on his hands, and he can't whack-a-mole any of these anymore. I don't think he has the wherewithal to whack-a-mole that much. He's got practice, but I think that maybe we, meaning America, I think we have showed him that he's met his match. Okay. Well, they still, when I say they, I'm talking about a capital T, they, with, they who are aligned with that, which I don't want to name, but I'm going to say it anyway, Trump. They do have a lot of guns, don't they? When the Uvalde tapes came out of the cops saying that they weren't going to go into that room because they found out that the kid had, the shooter had what they called a battle rifle. I'm not going in there. He's got a battle rifle. That's what I'm calling everything now that they're strapping around their backs and on their shoulders and everything, carrying around, these military assault rifles. So you can't call it that. Remember that? You call it a military-grade assault rifle, and they go, that's not, you can't call it, you don't know how to name that. You can't have a critique of that. You don't know how to name it. Well, I'm calling them battle rifles from now on, because if the cops say that, and the cops came from war zones, this is the reason why you don't want to have cops from war zones come in and be cops, because they know what a battle rifle can do to you. The point I was trying to make, though, is that MAGA and all of these Christo nationalists heard that and said, this is exactly what we want. If the cops are afraid of our battle rifles, let's get more of them. And the NRA said, you want more battle rifles? Okay, here. All right. It's not for protection. They want to go on offense because their rights are being taken away. And how are their rights being taken away? Equity, equality, due process. Everybody is equal. No, I'm superior to all of them. No, you're in America. Everybody's equal. No, I have a constitutional right to believe my beliefs. Yeah, I guess so. But, as we say out here in the real world, if you're not woke, you might just walk off the cliff with your eyes closed, won't you? We don't want that. See, this is what makes us different. We don't want them to walk off the cliff with their eyes closed, but they're perfectly willing to push us off the cliff with our eyes open. That's the big difference. We care. We do. All right. Well, what else is going on in the world? Everything. So the LA school strike is still going on. I'd hate to be a parent of a young kid. What do you do when you're trying to go to work? Those are tough. But I still got to say. Oh, well, on the other hand, I got to hand it to Mayor Bass, the new mayor. She has set up places where your kids can go. Isn't that nice? Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Bass. But anyway, back in the day, what would you do? I guess you could, like, have your kid tag along to work. Maybe. I doubt it. Couldn't have taken my kid to the, to the tank farm that I was responsible for. I don't think that would have been safe or healthy. Not for a little kid. Not my little kid. Let's put it that way. So, yeah, you can't have, like, bring your kid to work day. Yeah, right. And if you didn't have a extended family support system, it could make it rough. Anyway, that is still going on, and I'm not denigrating the idea that somebody making, I got to tell you, there's people that are making $7 an hour, and that's not enough. Please. Okay. Oh, I came across an article that it's just like the height of both siderisms. The headline or the lead of the article was that Gavin Newsom and DeSantis are both the same because they want to tell you how to live. What? On the one hand, you have DeSantis, and we know what he's capable of and what he's doing. Book banning, you don't say gay. I mean, just any number of things, Just on and on. Plus, kidnapping asylum seekers and flying them to places that are in a snowstorm with no shoes or coats. What's up with that? He and Abbott both doing that stuff. Abbott from Texas. And then on the other hand, you have Gavin Newsom, who says women have a right to choose what they want to choose in terms of their health. And everybody's equal and has due process. Okay? They both are telling you how to live. Okay. I think I kind of like the equal protection due process, women having choice, their own personal choice to care for their health the way that they and their doctors have decided they want to care for their health. And billionaires can't block the beach. I like that. Okay. So who would you choose? DeSantis? Who has what? I heard is 5,000 miles, some ungodly wide swath of seaweed heading for the coast of Florida. We warned them. We warned them this would happen, and they just ignored us. It's not just going to hit Florida. It's going to get caught on the Virgin Islands and everything there in the Keys. But, yeah. Plus all the red tide that they have along the Florida coast, and we know what that's from. Effluent fertilizer out in the ocean causing algae blooms, and that is why you have red tide, and it stinks to high heaven because things are dying. And it can be toxic to people, too. And I got to tell you, the acid from it can actually eat the paint off your car. I don't know if they would now, because the paints and materials used to make cars are a bit different. But back in the day, the acid from red tide, the mist and all that was enough to pit the paint on your car. Don't want to be breathing it. That's what we used to say. If this is doing that to our cars, do we want to be here? No, let's get inland. Let's go skiing. Mountain skiing. Okay. And we could. And we did. Yeah, there were times, and everybody knows this who have been in the Southland, you can surf in the morning and ski at night. Yeah. Now I guess everybody can ski all the time. If you can get out of your house from the snow drifts, and they got more coming in. Yes, we do have more weather, and they had wild weather down there, and I say down there because we're up here in Oregon. California's in my heart and soul. But yeah, in SoCal, they had some wild weather, and we're going to attend to that in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yes, indeed. In fact, why don't we tell you what we have in store for you today on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays? Yes, the Mar-a-Lago documents case has taken an unusual turn, and we're going to find out more today and tomorrow, aren't we? Yes, we are. On the rest of the menu, a damaging tornado touched down in Montebello, California, just east of Los Angeles. When I say just east, I mean 8 miles just east. The Arizona Supreme Court ruled that state law does not require Governor Katie Hobbs to carry out state executions. And a woman was arrested on charges of setting fire to a building in Wyoming that was being renovated to house the state's only full-service abortion clinic. After the break, we move to the chef's table where farmers struggle in Argentina as drought withers their crops. And the World Bank put the cost of rebuilding Ukraine at $411 billion so far. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left and just down a skosh is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and maybe if you could afford what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month and thus becoming a recurring Patreon, it really does help us pay our bills and all the other costs it takes to run this powerhouse of resistance as we have been resisting powerfully for a dozen years. So there you go. All right. Thank you for your generosity in helping us fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coast 10 minutes before showtime. And so I put those links up out on social media so you can find the links to the actual articles and therefore, fact check. Read the whole article. There you go. So there it is. So follow me on Spoutable and Mastodon and Twitter at Justice Putnam. You can also follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Everywhere. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Ian Livingston and Jason Samanow from the Washington Post. Hazardous weather of practically every form has walloped California this week. On Wednesday, the same storm that blasted the San Francisco and Monterey Bay areas with damaging winds Tuesday spun up a tornado in Montebello, California, just 8 miles east of downtown Los Angeles. Videos of the twister, which hit about 11:20 in the morning Pacific time, revealed a cone-shaped funnel lofting large amounts of debris into the sky and shearing off parts of roofs. Local television affiliate KABC reported that the twister not only tore up the roofs of multiple industrial buildings, but also damaged cars and injured at least one person. It felt like a bomb or something exploded, but then you see everything flying around, all the debris. It just felt weird. You're not used to it, an eyewitness named Miguel told local affiliate Fox 11. Montebello is 20 miles from the waters of the chilly Pacific Ocean, where rainfall tends to come with relatively cool air that is not normally conducive to thunderstorms. But this case, the hurricane-like storm that slammed the San Francisco Bay Area on Tuesday drifted south to near Monterey Bay instead of heading inland. It drew moist air over Southern California that helped feed the pop-up thunderstorms in the region on Wednesday. All the while, there was enough sunshine early in the day around Los Angeles to heat the ground, while cold air entered the area at high altitudes. The resulting temperature contrast between the ground and high elevations created enough atmospheric instability to build the storm that spawned the Montebello tornado. The tornado that hit Montebello was the second to hit Southern California in 2 days. On Tuesday, video showed that a weak twister showed up in Carpinteria, a small seaside city in Santa Barbara County. That tornado damaged more than 24 mobile homes. The National Weather Service office in Los Angeles said in a bulletin that it dispatched crews to survey the damage in both Montebello and Carpinteria to determine whether tornadoes touched down and assign damage ratings. By yesterday afternoon, the Weather Service issued a bulletin stating that the Carpinteria tornado was rated an EF0 on the 0 to 5 scale for intensity and produced winds up to 75 miles per hour. In a tweet last evening, the Weather Service confirmed that the tornado occurred in Montebello, but said it had not yet assigned a rating. Jacques Billiou of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The Arizona Supreme Court has ruled that state law does not require Governor Katie Hobbs to carry out the April 6th execution of a prisoner who was convicted of murder. The decision marks a legal victory for the newly elected Democratic governor, whose office said the state is not currently prepared to carry out the death penalty. The High Court had set the April execution for Aaron Gunchis, who fatally shot Ted Price near Mesa, Arizona in 2002. The order came after Hobbs said executions will not be carried out until Arizonans can be confident that the state is not violating constitutional rights when it enforces the death penalty. The governor vowed 2 weeks ago that she would not carry out the court's order while the state reviews death penalty protocols that she ordered because of Arizona's history of mismanaging executions. Lawyers for Hobbs said the department lacks staff with proper expertise and does not have a current contract for a pharmacist to compound the pentobarbital needed for an execution. They also said corrections officials are unable to find out the identity of the state's prior compounding pharmacist, who primarily had contact with an official no longer with the department. A top corrections leadership position critical to planning executions remains unfilled. Corrections Director Ryan Thornell said he was unable to find enough documentation to understand key elements of the execution process and instead has had to piece it together through conversations with employees on what might have occurred in past executions. Hobbs maintained that while the court authorized Gunch's execution, its order does not require the state to carry it out. Arizona, which currently has 110 prisoners on death row, carried out 3 executions last year after a nearly 8-year hiatus brought on by criticism that a 2014 execution was botched and because of difficulties obtaining execution drugs. Since then, the state has been criticized for taking too long to insert an IV for lethal injection into a condemned prisoner's body and for denying the Arizona Republic permission to witness the 3 executions. Gruber of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A woman was arrested on charges of setting fire to a building in Wyoming that was being renovated to house the state's only full-service abortion clinic, authorities said yesterday, Wednesday, hours after a judge temporarily blocked a ban on abortion that went into effect a few days ago. Lorna Roxanne Green, age 22, of Casper, was arrested by Casper police and agents from the FBI and the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, Wyoming U.S. Attorney Nicholas Vassallo said in a statement. She faces up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine if convicted. She is scheduled to appear in federal court in Cheyenne this morning. The fire was set on May 25th of 2022 at a stucco house in Casper, the state's second largest city and the site of frequent anti-abortion protests. A witness told police they heard glass breaking and saw a person leaving the area carrying a gas can and a black bag. Security video released by police showed a woman in a hooded shirt and wearing that mask, carrying what appeared to be a red fuel can through a room of the building just before the fire. No one was injured in the blaze, which left planned Wellspring Health Access Clinic with broken windows and smoke damage. The clinic had been scheduled to open last summer as the only facility of its kind in the state, offering women's health care, family planning, and gender-affirming health care in addition to abortion services, but the fire delayed those plans. I think that's how it was planned. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
An unlikely team of researchers and, get this, tiger sharks has discovered the world's largest seagrass ecosystem. It's been hiding in plain sight just off the coast of the Bahamas. The results appear in Nature Communications. This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Joseph Polidoro. As ecosystems go, seagrasses are right up there with rainforests and coral reefs.
But it's actually one of the most important hubs or magnets for biodiversity.
Austin Gallagher is a marine biologist and CEO of Beneath the Waves, an ocean conservation nonprofit. Seagrasses are nurseries to a fifth of the world's largest fisheries and are shelters for thousands of species. They protect other habitats and coastlines, and they store enormous amounts of carbon that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere.
It's sort of this, incredible unsung hero of ocean conservation.
But as much as half the world's seagrass is yet to be found. We're protecting these critical ecosystems with surveys that are as accurate as an early Renaissance map of the New World. That's because unlike mangroves and warm water coral reefs, seagrass meadows aren't always picked up by satellite or airplane observation. Cloud cover and glare from the seafloor also keep the Bahamas seagrass hidden.
So there's a lot of false negatives and a lot of false positives.
Carlos Duarte is a marine ecologist at King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia.
If I had tried to do it myself, probably I wouldn't have never tried.
For decades, Carlos had suspected that the Bahama banks might host an enormous seagrass habitat, but he couldn't prove it.
Remote sensing will never produce a reliable record, and then ground truthing the Bahamas banks because of the sheer size proved impossible.
By the way, ground truthing is establishing the on-the-ground truth by direct observation. For seagrass, that's usually done by divers or by researchers on a boat.
I really believe that if we had not come together like we did, this discovery might not have happened.
Then by chance, Carlos met Austin and saw footage from Austin's shark-mounted cameras.
And we saw these vast underwater seagrass meadows.
Carlos had found his ground truthers.
Tiger sharks were the total game changer of this whole process. And tiger sharks love seagrass habitat. So tiger sharks are this incredible ally.
But how do you collaborate with a large carnivorous shark?
These tiger sharks have teeth that are capable of doing serious damage. And that's not, demonizing them. That's just a fact.
For the study, Gallagher's team caught 8 tiger sharks and outfitted them with satellite tags. The researchers also attached cameras to 7 more sharks. At first,
waves crashing, it's just hectic nature, everybody's shouting, we're reeling this animal in, trying to restrain it, put a tail rope around its tail, fasten it to the side of the boat.
Once the shark is secured,
well, it's actually kind of amazing. It just kind of chills out, and it actually is quite peaceful.
In 12 minutes on average for each shark, the team took measurements, collected blood samples, and installed the recording equipment. The sharks were then released to roam the bank's seagrass meadows. The tiger sharks were much better observers than humans.
About 70 kilometers per day, 24/7.
They're also 1/5 the cost of humans or drones. By combining the shark footage and location data with thousands of boat and diver surveys, the team could correctly interpret the satellite images,
ultimately revealing the world's largest seagrass meadow up to 93,000 square kilometers.
That's about the size of Portugal and nearly 40 times the size of original estimates. The find increases known seagrasses globally by 1/3. The world's remaining undiscovered seagrass meadows will be smaller, Carlos says. To map them, Carlos will use another charismatic denizen of seagrass ecosystems, sea turtles.
So we're doing that now in the Red Sea, and then actually getting a very reliable mapping not only of where seagrass meadows are, but the individual area that they cover.
Carlos and his colleagues will soon be exploring near the Maldives and other archipelagos and island nations in Southeast Asia. Mapping seagrasses not only helps us protect them, it may also benefit the people who live near them.
So when you look at the carbon assets that sit in the seagrass meadow and the avoided emissions that can be achieved through conservation, and then apportion them to 300,000 people.
He's referring to the population of the Bahamas, now over 350,000 people.
Basically, every Bahamian owns $1 billion on carbon credits.
The team's work also puts sharks in a new, more flattering light.
These tiger sharks led us to these seagrass meadows. We now know that this is going to be a huge benefit for people of the Bahamas moving forward. It really demonstrates that if you protect the sharks, then you could potentially protect the people.
No small accomplishment for 15 tiger sharks and their human colleagues. For Scientific American's Science Quickly, I'm Joseph Polidoro. Science Quickly is produced by Jeff Delvicio, Tulika Bose, and Kelso Harper. Subscribe to Science Quickly wherever you get your podcasts, and follow scientificamerican.com for updated and in-depth science news.
Ready for our little forest adventure?
Yes!
So much waiting for me.
Yeah, I wanna go outside, I wanna be.
We're here.
Whoa, that was fast.
There's a forest closer than you think. Find a park or forest near you and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by USDA Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
In a mental health emergency, why are only the police called and not mental health professionals? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Recently, when 31-year-old Najee Seabrooks of Paterson, New Jersey, locked himself in a bathroom and was threatening to harm himself, claiming he had 3 knives and a gun, the police were called. As reported in the New York Times, during the hours-long ordeal that followed, with Seabrooks in a bathroom and the police outside the door, Seabrooks was texting members of a harm reduction collective that he had been working for. He asked for their help, saying, "I need to hear your voices. I need to see your faces." And Seabrooks' colleagues came to the apartment building and showed the messages to the police, but the police wouldn't let them participate. Rather, a police unit came with high-powered firearms and helmets. Seabrooks peeked out and saw them. Afterwards, the project director said, "Showing a gun to a person going through a mental health crisis like this only increases paranoia and fear." When Seabrooks exited the bathroom and lunged at the police with a knife, they said, "They shot him, and he died." The state attorney general's office is investigating. Hopefully, the investigation can address the question why in Paterson, like many cities and towns across the country, only armed police and not mental health professionals are called to respond to mental health emergencies. How does that make any sense? The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day the trial of 101 industrial workers of the world began in Chicago. Their alleged crimes? Speaking out against U.S. involvement in World War I. They were tried under the Espionage Act. but they were really targeted for prosecution because of their outspoken and radical labor organizing. In Chicago, 87 members of the union were held in the Cook County Jail for nearly a year before their trial. The so-called evidence in the case consisted mainly of newspaper articles and letters written by the IWW members. Most of them were before the U.S. had even entered the war. The trial lasted until August. The presiding judge was Kenshaw Mountain Landis, who shortly after the verdict would leave the bench to become the commissioner of Major League Baseball. In all, 150 Wobblies faced charges in Chicago, Wichita, Kansas, and Sacramento, California. Many received harsh sentences ranging from 5 to 25 years in prison. One of those convicted was Ralph Chaplin, the author of the labor anthem Solidarity Forever. In Leavenworth Prison, he continued to write verse. His poems reflected his yearning for freedom, including the lines, "Somewhere the dawn breaks laughing o'er the sea. To splash with gold the city's domes and towers, and countless men seek visions wide and free. In that alluring world that is now ours. But no one there could prize as much as we the open road, the smell of grass and flowers." In 1924, the last IWW prisoner from these trials was finally released from prison. But the crackdown had taken a major toll on labor organizations across the nation. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit with rain showers, which will evolve into a more steady rain in the afternoon. Highs expected to be in the mid-40s, winds out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour. And we're expecting about 1/3 of an inch of rain. Rain and snow showers this evening, transitioning to snow showers overnight. Lows in the upper 20s to low 30s, winds light and variable. And then rain and snow showers in the morning, changing to rain showers in the afternoon on Friday. Highs in the mid-40s, winds out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it, just about 1/4 inch of rain. Pollen remains rated none here in the little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 35 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is in the moderate range, ticked up to level 5. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.14 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 56 degrees with light rain. Paris is 62 and cloudy. Rome is 68 degrees and sunny. Kyiv is 62 degrees and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 48 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 75 degrees and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 67 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 66 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees partly cloudy with a flood watch. And New York, New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit with rain showers. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Victor Arcivano of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The ground crackles as Guillermo Quetino walks across dry farmland that should be green and lush this time of year. He grabs a soy plant and easily disintegrates its leaves with his hands. This year's drought was extreme, the agricultural engineer said this week at the farm where he works in Urquiza, a town about 143 miles from Argentina's capital. Quetino normally has a policy of not walking on cultivated land, but everything is so dry now there is absolutely nothing to damage. Even weeds are not growing. That scene is repeated in farms across Argentina, where harvesting should be in full swing, but months of dry weather has ruined it. Farmers are scrambling to make ends meet, and a sharp drop in expected revenue from exported farm products will deal a severe blow to Argentina's shaky economy. This drought is unprecedented, said farmer Martin Sturla, standing in the middle of a dusty field in nearby San Antonio del Reco. It's Dantesque. No one has seen anything like it. The situation is particularly dire because Argentina has already been suffering 2 years of unusually dry weather. The last 2 years were bad, but we always had some rain events that allowed us to get by, Coutinho said. Even experts have trouble coming to terms with the crisis. There are no words to describe the impact of a campaign marked by all-time historical records, a deficit of rainfall for the third consecutive year in the summer, persistent heat waves well into March, and agricultural frosts as late as October of 2022 and as early as February of 2023, said a recent report by the Rosario Board of Trade that has sharply cut estimates for this year's harvest. In its latest weekly report, the Buenos Aires Grains Exchange said this year's soybean production would be around 25 million tons, down 44% from the average of the last 5 cycles. Total wheat production, meanwhile, is forecast at 36 million tons, a 31% drop from the previous year.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Ellen Nickmeyer of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A World Bank report released yesterday, Wednesday, puts the cost of Ukraine's recovery and rebuilding from Russia's invasion at $411 billion over the next decade, with the cost of cleaning up the war rubble alone at $5 billion. The report details some of the toll of Russia's war in Ukraine. At least 9,655 civilians confirmed dead, including 461 children, nearly 2 million homes damaged, more than 1 out of 5 public health institutions damaged, and 655 ambulances damaged or looted. In all, the World Bank calculated $135 billion in direct damage to buildings and infrastructure so far, not counting broader economic damage. The damage would be even worse if not for the strong defense mounted by the Ukrainian forces. And Anna Bajurdi, the World Bank vice president for Europe and Central Asia, noted in a call with reporters. She said the worst damage has been confined to the frontline regions of Donetsk, Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Kherson. As it is, the World Bank said Russia's invasion has undone 15 years of economic progress in Ukraine, cutting Ukraine's gross domestic product by 29% and pushing 1.7 million Ukrainians into poverty. The assessment was carried out by the government of Ukraine, the World Bank Group, the European Commission, and the United Nations. The findings are meant to guide planning for financing and carrying out what is an ongoing recovery effort in Ukraine. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.